This episode is brought to you by Jira. Jira is the only project management tool you need to plan and track work across any team. So if you're a team of developers, Jira better connects you with teams like marketing and design, so you have all the information you need in one place. Plus, their AI helps you knock out the small stuff so you can focus on delivering your best work. Get started on your next big idea today in Jira.
Let's do it here.
In Leap, I've discovered flowers in flames, the new floral facet, the YSL way.
It's floral, but in the hottest way, and it's both luminous. It's really such a statement. It's a real ultimate freedom sensation. So, Yves Saint Laurent.
Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. I'm really excited about today's guest, Nick Gausling. He's optimizing specialty B2C companies for greater bottom line impact. He's going to talk about the future of retail, building to last, building an omni-channel, really interesting. And he also comes from the same city, Houston. Nick, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, we had connected through Podmatch and set the stage for this fireside. Tell people your background, your story, and we'll get into the discussion.
Yeah, my background is pretty eclectic. It may be even a little scattered in some ways when you look back on it in retrospect. But when I look at the unifying themes, a lot of it really had to do with specialty consumer goods companies. So I was in the beverage space for a couple of years as an executive. I was in financial services, consumer-facing financial services and venture capital. I was in specialty retail. So really, specialty consumer goods was the unifying theme of my career. And I didn't plan that. That's just how it happened and how I became an expert in those things over the years. So yeah, I'm originally from Las Vegas, Nevada. Interesting place to grow up. And have been in Texas for about 5 years. And we love it out here. Yeah.
Except for the brutal summers.
That is not fun. But being from Vegas, I'm used to 115 degree heat. So yeah, and as used to as you can ever be, I guess. You'll never really get used to it, but
yeah. So what's interesting is I'm always interested in cutting edge ideas and themes. I'm always looking at the big picture. So you talk about the future of retail, and I think Amazon really showed retail the kind of the exits, but I'm interested in seeing what's after that. You talk about don't fall behind the times.
Yeah, I think a lot of it really has to do with how you're approaching customer experience. There's a lot of expectations that have been changing over the years in terms of what customers expect if you're in a retail business, whether that's a traditional brick and mortar retailer or you're a direct to consumer manufacturer, who's selling through e-commerce or some other channels like that. It's really all about what kind of experience are you providing for your customer. Even if you're not in specialty retail, if you're more in like convenience goods, there's still a strong customer experience element to it. It's not quite as important, but it's still important. You got to think about things like if you were in the position of being a customer, what do you want when you interact with a brand? You probably want to be able to find the information you're looking for. You want to be able to know if the product or service is going to be a good fit for you. So new technologies that we're seeing come to the fore to accomplish that are things like augmented reality, virtual reality. Retailers are incorporating those into their stores. There are ways to do that through e-commerce and web channels as well. For example, and just an arbitrary example off the top of my head, but if you're in fashion or something like that, there's now technologies that allow the customer to visualize what they look like in certain clothing or how certain furniture, if you're in the furniture business, would fit inside their home for decor purposes. If you're in more of like consumer packaged goods, I talked about this in a recent interview with the Food Institute. Customers sometimes want to know about like the supply chain. Hey, where did my food come from? Tell me about the farm that my vegetables were grown on. Augmented and virtual reality technologies can help make that more of an immersive customer experience for your user, for your customers. So these are just a few examples of some of the changing dynamics that we've seen in retail. And then, of course, in the past year or so, AI has become the big talking point. And I actually I released a book earlier this year on the business use of AI, but in retrospect, I think I published it in February. It's now, so much of it is already obsolete because AI keeps changing so quickly and dramatically. But a lot of different things like that. But my big picture advice, so I don't get too long-winded here, the takeaway is consider the customer experience. It's about what can you do to immerse the customer in your brand and really just provide the kind of experience that you expect when you're a customer.
Yeah. Yeah. So you gave so many interesting talking points. One thing we'll talk about AI and all of these new technologies. One thing is talking about is, especially after 2020, a lot of businesses, after 2020, I transitioned my business to a completely digital, virtual. I can run it from anywhere in the world and 24/7. But is brick and mortar still relevant in today's digital first retail environment?
Yeah, it definitely is in retail. And as a physician, and I'm assuming a lot of your audience are physicians, there's definitely still a place for having a physical clinic. Like there's some things if you need to get a shot or something, you can't do that through a computer. But a lot of medicine that is consultative can be done through virtual. So I think we've seen a lot of that really shift in your field, and I think that's a very positive thing. But in terms of like traditional retailing, like you're selling a product, yeah, brick and mortar is definitely not going away anytime soon. We've seen predictions for decades now that this was going to go away. Everything would just be entirely online. And that's really not what's happened. During COVID, it briefly became a necessity for many businesses that were only able to sell online because their physical locations, depending on where they were, may have been completely shut down. And there's many customers that want to only buy online, but the bulk of your customers probably are a mix, just like most of us probably are. Sometimes you want to buy online. Sometimes you want to browse a store. If you need something immediately, you don't want to wait for 2 or 3 day delivery. You want to be able to drive and pick it up. So there's definitely still going to be a place for brick and mortar, at least for the foreseeable future. I think maybe someday, some indeterminate point down the road where you can just press a button and a drone flies whatever you want to your house in under half an hour, then maybe we won't need brick and mortar very much. But the technology is a long way off from that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Amazon is just the first tipping point with this, like the Prime. And then sometimes you get same day delivery, which is amazing. So yeah. And then you touched on this idea where it's not going to be all digital. It's going to be a hybrid, or like just coming back from Seattle, like the whole like commercial, like, a lot of those buildings are empty. Just so talk about building to last. There's a great book, Built to Last, but creating a business that weathers economic turmoil. This is so key, especially in today's business landscape.
And there's some things that can like spring on us through macroeconomic or geopolitical events that are just totally unexpected, right? And look at just COVID again. That was the most recent example, right? Look at what happened. And then just looking at least American history in years prior, you had the banking crash or the .com crash, like any kind of number of crazy things could happen that are totally outside the control of your business. And you need to be prepared to endure that. But then there's also things that can just come up during the natural course of business. Businesses go through just natural peaks and troughs. And some of the general advice that I give, and it does help to, when I'm working with a client or something, do analysis and really dive in and come up with some specifics. But things that are generally applicable, I think, no matter what business you're in, are you need to have some cash in your business set aside for a rainy day, right? That's just good old timey advice, and it still works even for a business. So just as an individual or a family, you should probably have some kind of financial emergency fund. Your business needs to have some kind of financial emergency fund that'll allow you to make payroll and cover your necessary operating expenses in the event of something unexpected. Another big thing is not being overly reliant on just 1 or 2 third parties. All of our businesses rely on third parties to some extent, no matter what business you're in. If a handful of your suppliers or key accounts, key customer accounts, or the platform you're selling on, if you're all digital, concentrating 40, 50, 60% reliance into one third party puts you in a dangerous, and sometimes you don't really have a choice, but to the extent that you can diversify that a little bit, selling through multiple channels, having contingency plans with your vendors and backup vendors and all these sorts of things are, to the extent that you can accomplish that and to the extent that it's feasible, it's typically a good idea. Because a lot of times what happens when economic or financial turmoil hits a company, the immediate kind of knee-jerk reaction is to just start making cuts. And that could be cuts to personnel. It could be cuts to innovation and growth and technology, which is your future-facing part of your business. And if you cut too quickly and too deeply, you may survive temporarily, but you may really make it difficult to survive the long term, because like when you lay people off, and that's even setting aside the human element of the difficulty of laying people off, but you're also hollowing out institutional memory in your business. Like those are people who know your company, and when they're gone, you have to retrain all that. It can take years to rebuild. And if you're cutting growth and future-facing endeavors too quickly, yeah, you might save some cash to survive now, but you're probably going to fall behind when the crisis is over. And now you need to start rebuilding towards the future, but you've cut out your capacity to do that. So look, it's a delicate balance, right? It's whenever you're going through that kind of a financial crisis, which many businesses will inevitably at some point, it's tough to know and predict exactly what to do. But those are just good general principles that I like to advise on for thinking about how to approach it.
Yeah. So said, and especially a lot of part of my strategic planning is talking about risk analysis, risk mitigation. And especially after COVID, I broke it down to every single nuance. What are the risks? And do I have plan A, B, and C? Do I have insurance? Talking about all these things. And what you're talking about is diversification and risk diversification. And with the exception of climate change and AI, but depending on a platform to host all these are things I'm always constantly thinking, what happens if somebody hacks you or all these things? These are serious risks. And like hospitals, companies, they get hacked all the time, get their data stolen, which brings us to the idea of, we'll talk about omni-channel, but you talk about the cutting edge technology, generative AI, Web3, blockchain, autonomous vehicles, quantum computing. All these are hugely deflationary, hugely disruptive. So how should business leaders go about leveraging these technologies, learning about them, limitation, risk, and advantages?
Yeah. And so when we think about just the last few years, it's humorous in a way because it's like, we've had, oh yeah, crypto's the big thing, right? And then, oh wait, now it's Web3, which is crypto related, and now it's AI. And in the space of 2 or 3 years, we've gone through several next big things. And the funny thing is, all of those technologies are good technologies in and of themselves. They have a lot of promise for businesses. They're not going away. But what I think we've seen is it can be dangerous to overcommit or put all your eggs in one basket with that, or jump in too quickly into the pool, if you will. The technologies are iterating so rapidly, and we don't really know how it's going to shake out. My advice is you want to be on top of it. Like you want to understand what's happening and think about ways that you could kind of transition it into your business to make things more effective or reduce cost or increase customer experience. But you don't want to, it's that same thing we were just talking about with diversification, right? You don't want to put yourself to where you're entirely dependent on these new technologies. So to give you an example, like I saw, this was within probably a month or two, maybe even less than that, of when ChatGPT started to become a big thing. And I saw on LinkedIn, there was a woman who was a small to medium sized business owner, and she was hiring for a quote, chat GPT expert. And I'm like, chat GPT expert, the technology just came out in the last month or two. Like, how is anyone other than somebody who built chat GPT a chat GPT expert yet? And how are you going to hire somebody as staff and incorporate that into your business in such a big way? So maybe that's an extreme example, but the point is, I think really when it comes to these technologies, the buzzword that we should all keep in mind is augmentation, not replacement. So these are technologies that can help make us more effective, make your business more effective, but they should not be seen, at least not yet, as wholesale replacements for large portions of your business.
Yeah, I love that. And that's why I'm always have this podcast, talking to people with new ideas, always trying to get curious, play around with technologies, chat GPT. For example, instead of having blog and video editors, now I'm using a chat GPT and other AI enabled software, dramatically increase productivity, decrease costs. These are huge, and just playing around with it and trying different things and experimenting while you still have your main core business. And that way, when the time is right, it's again, I referenced 2020, when that time is right, you can flourish as opposed to scrambling and struggling and, running around. Like, really interesting. I think one final question is this idea, because this whole theme was diversification and this idea of, you have so many ideas, but one thing is talking about is building an omni-channel and going where the customers are. Talk about, a lot of people say just focus on one platform. You can see, obviously, if that platform goes away, you're in big trouble. So talk about becoming omni-channel.
Yeah. So the term omni-channel really, sometimes people use it as a synonym for e-commerce, but that's actually incorrect. It means, right, every channel, omni-channel. So the principles of omni-channel are about thinking where your customers are actually shopping, hanging out. That's where you want to be. That's where you want to be selling. So that could be a brick and mortar component. It could be your own website, e-commerce, direct to consumer component. It could be social media selling. It could be special events, right? And going around to conferences and fairs and concerts. Wherever your customers are is where you want to be and where you want to be selling. And that's really the overriding premise of omni-channel. So if you're a traditional brick and mortar type business, the low hanging fruit is obviously think about, hey, how can you incorporate a website and web sales and have that direct to consumer type experience through web channels. It's very different on the flip side when you're a traditional direct to consumer e-commerce business and you're adding retail distribution partners, because then it's okay. You have to think about things like slotting fees, which is where you're paying to get your product in the stores, dealing with manufacturer chargebacks. Your margins are going to take a hit. Are you going to be able to outrun it by getting more sales by partnering with retail distribution? Lots of different types of considerations. And it really depends on your specific business. But the overriding premise is just think about where your customers are and how you can reach them there. And typically, almost invariably, it's not just in one channel.
Yeah, I love that. And, and also your ideal customer avatar could shift from they enjoy reading blogs or Twitter or tweets and to photos, videos, and podcasting, all these different mediums. You always have to have some way of reaching that distribution segment. Really, this is what the traditional media companies have been doing, for decades. So again, I love this conversation. How can people contact you, follow you, check out your work, and reach out to you?
Yeah. So everything you need is on my website, nickgausling.com. My newsletter is on there. You can sign up for my free business newsletter where I dive into a lot of these topics in depth, and it's very obvious on the homepage. You can't miss it if you go to the homepage. And then, for anyone listening, if you're in a specialty business to consumer company and you're interested in potentially discussing your business with me, there's a place you can self-schedule that on the website as well.
Yeah, for all the audience out there, let's thank Nick for coming out to the show, fellow Houstonian, and this idea of disrupting yourself to stay relevant, becoming a category one, and all of his resources will be in the links in the show notes. And with that, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you. It was great to be here. Great conversation.